Freedom, an ever distant bird that many of us chase in order to feel like we have control, like we can do anything. But is it actually true? Is freedom, and more specifically free will, an existing phenomena which some of us experience? Well, what if I told you that freedom and free will are terms to describe a state of mind from the perspective of delusion and acceptance, rather than something that actually exists? Let's unravel, shall we? The topic of free will always seems to have very polarizing reception. People either accept it and doom about it, or tell that it's impossible by bringing religious based arguments or fringe theories, preconceptions on the edge of conspiracies. And I don't blame any side for doing so, because to accept lack of free will is to completely deny your autonomy, which is obviously depressing, and that makes actions of both sides reasonable and understandable. Nevertheless, let's go through my best argument as to why freedom and free will don't exist, while determinism does. Starting off with freedom, a good starting point would be movie The Shawshank's Redemption, which back when I watched it almost 10 years ago, single-handedly made me understand that it's never about what you do, but how you do it. Okay, so how does that relate to the topic at hand? Well, if you make a parallel line between what I just said and freedom, then being truly free is not about what you do, like being stuck at home, running in field, imprisonment, abusive relationship, etc., etc., but specifically about how you do any of these given things. In Shawshank's Redemption, it is shown how freedom isn't a binary switch where you're either free or not, but a spectrum, just like everything else, where depending on how you act, think, and express yourself during certain moments of your life determines how much freedom you have. What I said, of course, goes completely against the status quo of what freedom entails, since usually only the surface level of freedom is being discussed and or perceived. Despite that, without a deep dive into what freedom means fundamentally, it's pointless to use the term in any highly nuanced debate, which this is. Next on the chopping block, free will. Have you ever thought of how your environment, upbringing, and genes determine who you are, how and what you do? How your family conflicts breeds insecurity? How living in a poor country makes your education worse by default and also worsens your chances at a good life? Or how the people you happen to fight by chance either uplift you and help you achieve your goals, or beat you down and spell your doom? How many of these things do you have control over? And how much any single one of these things that I listed has affected your life? You see what I'm getting at? We have no control over where we are born, with who, and what happens in our life. That determines who we become, how we think, and how we do things, which in return only further solidify previously ingrained traits and experiences, making you choose specific sides of conflict, opinions, favorite foods, or hobbies. After all, you can't just start drinking tomato juice if you can't stand tomatoes. Not very free willy of you, isn't it? Now, it is important to mention something because in my most conversations about free will, one single argument has always arisen, which has led me to believe that people often merge free will and neuroplasticity. Those are different. Free will might not exist, but it doesn't mean that all of us are incapable of adapting to change, changing preferences, favorites, habits, and erasing detrimental lessons of the past. You might not have control, but what you have does influence the change of direction in which you're moving. As a finishing touch, let's talk about determinism. If you were to follow closely what I said previously, it should laterally make sense why determinism exists, but I would still like to elaborate on it anyway. Is it possible to predict the future? Not for you specifically, of course, just in general. The answer is yes, since we are already doing that with space objects, economy, or hell, even our own planet's weather. Sure, those predictions aren't always the most accurate, but have you ever wondered and asked yourself why? Let's think of an example of a chess grandmaster. Can they predict the future of their games? They can. How? Well, to be specific, experience, knowledge, and computing power. Now, if we go back to the general prediction of the future, the very same variables and principles work, meaning that the reason for lack of accurate or far predictions of the future lies within insufficient amount or quality of the previously mentioned experience, knowledge, and computing power. So to elaborate, experience would be knowledge of patterns, phenomena, cause effect relationships, and biases. Knowledge would be the pure information of, let's say, a comet, its size, composition, trajectory, speed, location, age, density, temperature, rotation, etc., etc. And computing would be a computational center, or AGI, or a quantum computer that would collect, compile, sort, analyze, and draw conclusions based on experience and knowledge that were inputted. Thus, it makes for an answer that, yes, predicting future is possible, but not in the near future. As you can see, all three mini theses that I've provided are mostly debunking biases and perceptual fallacies that lead to misunderstanding or even complete blockade and inability to perceive uncomfortable things, meaning that the biggest challenge of this topic isn't understanding it, but knowing yourself first and foremost, thus being mindful of trickery that our brain performs. That's about what I have for today. If you watched till the end, then please don't push yourself too much with these ideas, whether you agree or disagree, since they're quite stressful to handle even for experienced philosophers. And as always, think more than you procrastinate, do more than you think, and be more than what you do. See ya.